There we go.
Okay.
All right, now we're good. Okay, so very good. So yes, we're going to look again at chapter 8, or portion of chapter 8 for this coming Sunday, specifically verses 13 to 18, which is the celebration of the festival of Sukkot, the festival of booths and tabernacles. And so I'm going to dive in my message a little bit deeper on that. I felt like we got to touch on it, but then didn't get to spend enough time on it and the significance of it for the Jewish people and the significance of our own. The phrase I'm using to describe it is our temporary dwellings. So that's where we are for this weekend. So I'll read the text and then we will jump in. So this is 8:13. On the second day, the heads of the ancestral houses of all the people, with the priests and the Levites, came together to the scribe Ezra in order to study the words of the law. And they found it written in the law, which the Lord had commanded by Moses, that the people of Israel should live in booths during the festival of the 7th month. And they should publish and proclaim in all their towns and in Jerusalem as follows: go out to the hills and bring branches of olive, wild olive, myrtle, palm, and other leafy trees to make booths, as it is written. So the people went out and brought them and made booths for themselves, each on the roofs of their houses and in their courts and in the courts of the house of God, and in the square at the water gate and in the square at the gate of Ephraim. And all the assembly of those who had returned from the captivity made booths and lived in them. For from the days of Jeshua, son of Nun, to the day the people of Israel had, to that day, the people of Israel had not done so. And there was very great rejoicing. And day by day, from the first day to the last day, he read from the book of the law of God. They kept the festival 7 days, and on the 8th day there was a solemn assembly according to the ordinance. All right. So if you'll hang your finger here in Nehemiah 8 and then flip back to Leviticus 23. Leviticus 23 is where if you start at the beginning of the chapter, you see all of the different festivals that are outlined to be celebrated throughout the year. And so it starts with the Sabbath as the sort of the weekly festival. Then there's Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, the Festival of Weeks, which is connected to Pentecost, the Festival of Trumpets, the Day of Atonement, the Festival of Booths, which is Sukkot, and that finishes up the chapter 23. So if you want to get a sense of the Jewish calendar year, Leviticus 23 is a good spot to go to, because it'll outline all of those different festivals. I had lunch with a rabbi one time when I was early on in ministry, and he said he said, no offense to you Christians, but we Jewish people, we do parties way better than y'all, because we've always got something going on. and I've been to synagogue enough times to know that, when they roll out the wine and cheese bar, it's like, all right, they're having a good time.
Yeah, every Friday we go to El Paso, Shabbat, and food everywhere. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's all Mexican food.
Nice.
Which I love.
Yeah. I've gone to Temple Shalom a couple of times for a Shabbat service. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's like, and I've taken confirmation kids there, and it's always like, okay, kids, y'all stay over here. You cannot have the wine and cheese. All right.
No.
You can go have the grapes and stuff over there, and the crackers, but you can't have. Anyway, anyway, so the Festival of Booths starts in verse 33 and goes all the way to 43. So just you can make a reference back to that particular chapter in that particular section of chapter 23 in Leviticus for some more details. So so I start with the fact that the Festival of Booths or the Festival of Tabernacles, whichever different translations, those words are interchangeable, is a festival that has a dual significance. It has an agricultural significance and it has a historical significance. The agricultural side of it is that it happens in the fall, so all the produce is being harvested, and so it's the time when the people of the land who are farmers would have brought in the crops, and they would have come to the temple to offer gifts to the Lord for of Thanksgiving for the harvest. And so it has that essence to it, but that's only one side of it. But it's one of those, it factors into the other side of the equation, because there's these different kinds of produce that's coming ripe at that time in the fall. Is September, October is this time of the year. Then when they go to build and construct and decorate the booths, they use some of this produce to provide decorations. So there may be gourds, or there may be different kinds of things that are that are held. So one of the I can't remember which commentary it was that I read, but it sort of led into that question that I asked the first time through about a connection to another holiday, which was kind of around Thanksgiving, because those kinds of fall vegetables and fall produce would have been part of not only their offering to God, but would have been part of the decorations for their booth. So that's the agricultural significance, and that's the easy part. The more complex part is the historical aspect, the historical significance of Sukkot. So it is a commemoration of the 40 years that the Israelites spent in the wilderness when they lived in tents, when they lived in temporary dwellings, when they lived in booths, between the time they left Egypt and the time they entered the promised land. So it reminds the people of the wandering that their ancestors did in the wilderness in Sinai, and that they lived in temporary accommodations, that they had to follow God, whether that was with the pillar of cloud by day or the pillar of fire by night. They knew that God also lived in the tabernacle, the temporary dwelling that God was in. And when God said, or when the pillar moved, then they moved with him to stay focused on that. So let's see. So they commemorate this time in the wilderness by building these booths, these tabernacles, and they have a sort of a basic construction pattern of 3 walls, which are covered with some kind of material that won't blow away. So typically like canvas or something like that, that's tied down. And then they make the roof. And the roof is separate. The roof is its own piece, and it's made last, and it's put on last, and it is covered. The roof is covered with tree branches, in some cases like 2x4s, modern day, 2x4s. But specifically, it's mentioned, olive branches, wild olive branches, myrtle, palm, other leafy trees, and they use this to make the roof. And they have to, the instructions that are given are to make it open enough on the roof so that there is sunlight that gets through, so that when you're sitting in it at night, you can see the stars. And so that if it rains and you're sitting in your booth, you get wet. To remind you of living in that temporary space, living in the wilderness, living in the elements. And they're constructed either on the roof of their house, because remember, they have flat roofs, and they're not all pitched like ours. They didn't have attics, I guess. So they were either on the roof, they were in the courtyard in front of their house. And Nehemiah even says that some of them were in the courtyard of the house of God, so near the temple, and then near the square of the water gate, square of the gate of Ephraim. Basically, the conclusion I draw from that, or the point I make of that, is that they were out in public. They weren't sequestered to their own. They were out, more so into the community. It's not like, and because it only had three walls, I mean, the front of it was open so that other people could see in to what they were doing. The most basic way to adhere to this command to dwell in your booth was to have all of your meals eaten in the booth. That was, that's the, like, if you're thinking like perfection, keeping the commandment is here, then eating all your meals is down here. And so somewhere in between is where you want to fall. And so you had to at least eat all of your meals during the festival of Sukkot. In the Sukkah it's what it's called. It's the way to pronounce it in Hebrew. You couldn't work on the first day of the festival, and then there was a solemn assembly on the 8th day, the day immediately following it. So let's see what else. Let's see. So there was a prayer that was said by the family at every meal, and I'll talk about it, and I actually pray it a couple of times during my message. But the prayer is, "Blessed are you, O God, creator of time and space, who enriches our lives with holiness, commanding us to dwell in the Sukkah," which is the name of the temporary dwelling that they have built. "Blessed are you, O God, creator of time and space, who enriches our lives with holiness, commanding us to dwell in the Sukkah." So it's a commemoration of the 40 years that they wandered. And the spiritual connections that I draw from this there are 5 of them actually that I draw out. And it draws from the fact that the time in the wilderness and the time of remembering and reminding themselves of the time in the wilderness is a time of testing and a time of preparation. The time in the wilderness was a time of testing and preparation, because again, when you think back historically to what's going on, what that 40 years of time in the wilderness actually represents is the time between when God frees the people from Egypt, frees them from slavery, and they wander around for 40 years until they walk into the promised land. They cross the Jordan River and go into the promised land. And in that 40 years, they had to learn how to be the people of God. They had to stop being slaves, and they had to relearn what it meant to follow God. And so I quote J.D. Walt, who's a writer for Seedbed Publishing, and he says that it took one day for God to get Israel out of Egypt, but it took 40 years to get Egypt out of Israel, because for 430 years they were slaves. And so that's all that multiple generations of Israelites knew was slavery. And that time in the wilderness was time for them to understand what it meant to be a faithful covenant people of God. And so they needed that time and so they so the let's see. So the spiritual connections that I make are that God sustains us for the journey. That the Israelites had manna from heaven, they had water from a rock, they had quail up to their noses, and it happened every day. They had food to eat every day. They had clothes that didn't wear out. They had sandals that didn't wear out. Their feet never got swollen while they were walking in the desert. And all along the way, God sustained them for what they needed and was able to keep them moving. God provides. The second one is that God provides us what we need. So let's see. I'm gonna go to my slides real quick and make sure I say it the way that I say it in my message, just for y'all's edification. Let's see. All right. So yeah, God sustains us for the journey. Yeah. Their clothes didn't wear out, their feet didn't swell, and we as a church have learned over the last year plus that that we've been in basically a continuous exercise of learning that life is a marathon rather than a sprint. That we're in this for the long haul, and that we have the ability and the stamina, and God is sustaining us with the power of the Holy Spirit to make it through what we've been through since March of 2020. Let's see. So God provides us with what we need. So when I'll tell the story of when COVID shut us down in March 2020, we had the equipment and the people that we needed to turn around and go online in 2 days. It was a miraculous turnaround for us. And I stopped short of telling the people that, or saying in my sermon, because I'll tell the story later, but that we never missed a Sunday, we never missed a holiday in the whole time since March 2020. You know, we've had 2 Lents in recording sessions. We've had 2 Easters in recording sessions. We've had, Holy Week twice. We haven't missed a Sunday while we've been out of the building, whether that was for water break or for for COVID. So, the Israelites had, when they were hungry and thirsty, God provided manna and water as soon as they asked and as soon as they made their needs known. Now, the interesting thing is they grumbled about it. They complained that Moses had brought them out into the desert, and why can't we go back to Egypt where there were, we could sit beside the flesh pots and we could eat our fill, and anyway, it's like, stop. Anyway, it's like, oh, I'll give you a meat to eat. Anyway, that's a funny story for later. It's fun when the Bible makes you laugh. I get a kick out. Okay. All right. So God sustains us for the journey. God provides all that we need, us with what we need. The third one is that God directs us in His paths. During the last, since March 2020, the Lord has used the scriptures to drive us forward with the Acts series, watching the power of the Holy Spirit take the gospel to the known world, through seeing how Esther led in such a time as this for to save her people, to see the good shepherd who watches over his flock and leads them in the paths of righteousness. All of those things are pulled right out of Scripture and have moved us forward as a congregation. And so God used in the wilderness, God uses the pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire to direct the paths of the Israelites. So when they were wondering which way to go, they knew that if the cloud started moving, that they were supposed to pack up and follow. And when the cloud stopped moving, they were to set up their camp again. And I can't remember exactly where it says in the, I think it's in, I want to say it's in Numbers, but there's a line in there that says that when it basically says when the cloud moved, they moved, and when the cloud didn't move, they didn't move, whether that was for a day or for a year or however long. They always paid attention to where the cloud was, and through that, God directed their path. All right. The fourth one is that God prepares us for what is to come. So I talk about how our time of learning how to be a virtual church has prepared us for a time of being a hybrid church that's coming ahead, where we will be both online and in person, and how we will have those things going forward, and that we learn some things through our online experience that we will take with us back into our in-person experience, that we won't forget those lessons. And then the Israelites had to learn how to no longer operate as slaves, and to grow into what it meant to be a people set apart for God's glory. That was the whole idea of giving them the Torah and calling them to holiness, was that they were to be a different kind of people than all the other people in the region, that they were God's chosen people, and that they would be set apart by food laws and circumcision and their worship practices and the ways that the way that they rested on the Sabbath, like they didn't work 7 days a week. All of those things made them different than the rest of the people around them. And they learned that in that time in the wilderness, how to do all those things and how they should be the people set apart for the honor and glory of God. And just like us, they sometimes they get it right, and sometimes they don't. And sometimes sometimes they pay the consequences for that, or individuals pay the consequences for that. But all along the way, they're learning. So God prepares us for what's to come. And then the last one is that God reminds us of his faithfulness. So the festival of Sukkot, again, is a reminder and a remembrance of the time in the wilderness. And if you note that right at the beginning in verse 13 in Nehemiah 8, the leaders of the ancestral houses call upon Ezra to call upon them all to study the words of the law. So they're retelling their story. They want to reread the Torah, and it's in there they find that they're supposed to be celebrating this festival. But inherent in reading the Torah is retelling their story, from the very beginning, and all of the things God has done through creation and through the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to their time in slavery, to all the way up to their current state. They will, again, they will remember what God has done, and how God has been faithful to them all along the way. And so their retelling of their story helps them to be reminded of God's faithfulness, and telling our story of the last 18 months will help us remember how God has been faithful to us, and how God has been faithful to his word, and how God has been faithful even when we forget to remember. Read the book of Deuteronomy. It's all over there. Don't forget to remember. Don't forget to remember. Remember this, because unfortunately, most of us have minds like a steel sieve. Lots goes in, and then a lot comes out too. So that's not a quote from my sermon, but it should have been. Anyway.
And the holes in the sieve get bigger as you get older.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
I've heard that.
Yep.
So that's why I write things down, because I can remember this. But if I have a random thought, I'm like, oh yeah, I have a random thought, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's no problem. I'll never forget that. 3 seconds later, what did I just think?
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's going to get a whole lot better to you when you get old.
Is it? Excellent.
No.
The word of hope.
Are you kidding? No way.
Anyway, so I wrap up with talking about how temporary dwellings may not be ideal. Like if you think about these 3 walls, a roof that's designed to let sun and rain in, and living outdoors when you're used to having, in our world, in our day and age, air conditioning or heat, all the way closed up windows that you can look through, electricity, that kind of stuff. When you think about that temporary dwelling, it might not be ideal, but it is indeed ground that the Lord can use to help us grow our faith in his faithfulness. It's an opportunity, these temporary dwellings, whether that's our facility that's now under construction, or whether that was your living room because we were online and you had to worship at home, or your recliner and an iPad or whatever. All of those places became temporary dwellings for us to be present with God. They may not be ideal. It's obviously not ideal for us to be apart from one another. We're built for community. We're built to be connected to one another. But there's still ground for God to remind us of his faithfulness in our lives. And so that's Sukkot, again, the festival. It's a reminder. It wasn't a permanent situation. It was a reminder. It was a temporary dwelling. And the time in the wilderness, I mean, if you think about 40 years in the wilderness, it was only 1/10 of the time that they spent in slavery. So it was a tithe. Anyway, I don't make that connection, but you could go there. But it was a tithe of the time that they spent in slavery to prepare themselves for this time as they enter into the promised land. So, and I make a couple of New Testament connections. One is that Jesus spent 40 days in the wilderness prior to his earthly ministry beginning, where he was tested and tempted, and where he was hungry and thirsty, to prepare him. And then I talk about how Lent is our annual celebration, or our annual time of preparation for the events of Holy Week and Easter. And that's, again, a time of testing and preparation spiritually for what's coming ahead. So I connect those in. as well. Let's see. Yep. So, yeah, there you go. And I think, yeah, that took less time than it did to do my sermon. So, you got the Reader's Digest version.
Yeah.
So, all right. What any questions arising in the moment that that you have on that?
What did you say the name of your sermon is? Title?
It's Temporary Dwellings is the name
Okay.
of my name of my sermon.
No yawning. No yawning.
I'm sorry. I apologize for that.
Oh.
Sorry. I know they're contagious.
Oh, yes, they are. Oh.
I had a friend who was so susceptible to yawning that me and a buddy of mine got her a card for her birthday that had a little baby yawning on it. The inside, she opened it up and she was just like, ooh. Yeah,
it does. It gets you.
It was that we just rolled on the floor laughing at that. I did not think it was that funny, but we did. Anyway, high school hijinks right there.
Just to comment on in one of the commentaries I was looking at. This one's by Redford, R.A. Redford. But it makes mention that church life ought to be the real root of all other life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they were doing with their celebration. They were trying to incorporate all other life into the life of the church, and that's where it needs to be. What the center is.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that comment.
Yeah, no, that's yeah. I think the more so than most. I think Muslims have a good grasp on that as well. That that the religious life is the center. I think at least in Western Christianity, we've lost a lot of that in the last 100 years or so, as the religious life being the center of things. Now there's pockets of it, obviously. Look at the Amish or something like that.
Right.
That's one of the exceptions. But most Western Christianity is it's a portion of somebody's week or day, and for many people, it's an add-on to the rest of what you do, whether that's work or what's going on with your kids or whatnot. So it's not the centralizing factor. So it doesn't shape daily life the way that it once did, and the way that the scriptures, at least the Hebrew scriptures, model.
Sadly.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. The other one that I pick up on some of these things every now and then. He's talking, whoever this was, I didn't write down a name, that their negligence of the church and of knowing the word is due to a blameworthy inattention to the word of God. The Bible is too much on the shelf, too little in the hand.
Whoa. That's awesome. I love that.
I do too.
Yeah.
Too much on the shelf.
Too much on the shelf, little in the hand.
Little in the hand.
All right. I'm going to write that down so I don't forget.
He's gonna write that down
I'm
now.
gonna write that down so I don't forget.
Do I need to find, I'll try to find out for you who that
Yeah,
was.
if you can find the source, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I don't remember.
And it
if
won't
that
go to Gary.
So I'll give you.
It might be Clarkson. W. Clarkson.
Okay.
That's who I've got as the name in front of all that, but I'll verify it.
Okay. Too much.
And I learned this week that homily.
Uh-huh.
I've heard the word homily all my life, and I had never really put it together with sermon. But basically, that's, I guess, what it is.
Yeah, I use homily in the sense of like for weddings and funerals, I do short things. So
Okay.
if it's a short deal, then I call it a homily. If it's a full blown 20 minutes plus whatever, that's a sermon. So,
Okay.
so like
a sermonette.
Sermonette, yeah, that's another. Some people, novel, novella kind of,
Yeah.
novella is a short, so, but yeah. Well, and I mean, I went to Catholic high school, and so there was always somebody, the priest or whatever, that did the homily. That's what they always called it. Didn't matter how long it was, because it was always supposed to be less important than the sacrament. Which the sacrament of Holy Communion is the high point of Mass. So theologically, for Catholicism. That's so anyway, and in most Protestant churches, the sermon is the high point. So anyway, all right. What else? So hopefully this week, and you may. So part of as I was brainstorming for this particular message, the idea of gathering some pictures and clips and things like that of what's been shared on Facebook and things like that, as far as your worship at home setups. I've gathered some of those things, plus some of the other things we've done because we've been in temporary situations. So there'll be some interspersed pictures in the video this week. So I'm excited about seeing what comes of it. I'll get the first draft of it in the morning to see kind of how that goes. So, but I got, I asked on Facebook the other day about people sending me a picture of what do they see on Sunday morning because we've been online. And so I got a picture of Jamie Pearson's iPad. I got a picture of Shanna Biltz from her couch with Landon under a blanket, on the love seat with me from, I think, like sometime during Lent when we were still in the building, because it was in the worship center. So, but got several responses back that were kind of cool. Like, there's my TV and there's you on the TV. I was like, man, far too many of these pictures have me in it. So have to share the love a little bit.
Be sure you get one of Colleen and Jan.
Oh yes.
Those darn purple T-shirts. I swear.
Yeah.
I wish I'd known for 4th of July, I would have given them some red, white, and blue ones.
There you go. Yeah. How many of those T-shirts do they have? They seem to have one every week.
Yep, every Sunday.
Anyway, very good. Well, so yeah, it's
who do I get in contact with to help or talk about celebration for the first Sunday back?
Sherry Betts.
Okay. Sherry or Carrie?
Sherry.
Sherry.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, she's organizing that. There'll be some more information coming out in the newsletter about that. Even though we don't know what day it'll be yet, we're already making plans for that. So Sherry is the one who is coordinating that.
Okay.
Very good.
Dean, have you heard anything about Carol Buffington?
I know that like she fell a month ago and she didn't break anything, but she's been having severe pain ever since. So
Okay. Yeah, she contacted us this week. She needed a walker and she needed a shower chair, which I think we were all able to come up with. But point being, I just wanted to be sure that you knew she was in a lot of pain.
Yes, she actually has been. She texts in every Tuesday, kind of giving me an update when the prayer request text goes out. So she texted me that first week that it happened, and then she's kind of gone. She's like, "Okay, I'm doing all right," but then it was like,
Yeah.
The
She's
doctors haven't
called
been
a
able
couple
to.
times this week, I think.
Okay.
Oh. Yeah, I don't know if you heard how it all got started. She was over her daughter's, and one of her daughter's dogs got behind her, and there was a dog in front of her that was trying to get attention, and she was backing up, fell over the dog that was behind her, and hit her head on the concrete.
Yeah.
So she's lucky she didn't get a concussion, but she's had nothing but problems ever since.
Yeah. Alrighty. Yeah, so I guess Debbie Crow was reached out to Debbie Willis about meals or something, meal train or something. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if it was she needed something set up so that other people could sign up or what. I don't know.
Okay.
Now we don't have anything this Sunday evening, correct?
That is correct. No, nothing this Sunday. But yeah, we're all done with our fellowship nights for now. But we, at least I'm gonna say we continue to do them even once we're back in the building. Maybe on a quarterly scale or every other month, something like that. Yeah, we'll keep doing that, and I'm going to challenge the staff to come up with a few more, like maybe 3 or 4 more options that we can do as fellowship nights, so we can have some more variety of things, as well as different mission projects, so different worship opportunities. I know Casey wanted to do some kind of gospel, Southern gospel kind of choir deal, but he was waiting to get choir back in and going before he put that on the calendar. So, all right, well, when you got it ready, just let me know and we'll put it on the calendar.
When he needs choreography, I'm here.
Oh, well, all right. I'll write that down too.
Yep. I still haven't done Sister Act. Come on, you gotta do Sister Act.
Oh my gosh. Well, I don't know if the youth talent show is going to make a resurrection at some point, but
could work it.
Yeah. We love him. We love him. And when he goes up.
Oh dear.
All right, we have We have lost track. Anyway. Oh goodness. All right. Very good. I will put this together and send y'all out a little sort of a synopsis and maybe throw in a few questions that you could ask around this, so that if you want to throw those out to your folks and see what kind of discussion you can rouse up, that'd be great. But I'll get that to you here. I'll get that to you by the end of the day. I'll have that ready to go. Very good. Well, as always, I appreciate you very much. And Gary, it was great to see Gail on our call Tuesday night.
Oh, yes. She was glad to be there.
Yes. And she jumped right in. She didn't hesitate a bit.
That's kind of how it works here too.
Well, and with that, I'll stop recording.
Yes, you're better.
Yeah, she's right here. She heard it. You said be careful what you say. I don't know if she's talking to me or you, but
It was on Staff Parish after all.
she's talking to all of us.
We're all in trouble.
Be careful.
Yes, ma'am.
I can
Yes,
come
ma'am.
back to haunt you.
All righty.
All right. All right, y'all. Y'all have a great week. And
Thank
let me know if
You
need
too.
anything.
Thanks.
All right,
Bye-bye.
blessings.
Goodbye.